The Elbe River ran black under the East German sky, a ribbon of ink separating two worlds that hated each other enough to kill over the width of water. October 1983. The Cold War wasn't cold along this border. It was frozen solid with the kind of tension that made men's hands shake, even when they weren't afraid. Lieutenant Garrett Whitmore pressed himself flat against the muddy bank, 26 years old and already tired of watching good men die for lines on maps. His SEAL team had been in country for 72 hours, running recon on a Soviet naval facility that intelligence said was developing something worth knowing about. They'd gotten what they came for. Now they just had to get out. The problem was the man bleeding out 30 feet upstream. Whitmore had spotted him an hour ago, crawling through the reeds like a wounded animal, leaving a trail of blood dark enough to see even in the moonless night. East German. Stasi, probably, based on the way he moved, trained and deliberate even with a bullet in his gut. Could be a trap, could be bait, could be a dozen things that ended with Americans in body bags. But the man was alone, and he was dying. Whitmore made a decision his commanding officer would have court-martialed him for. He moved upstream, low and silent, his rifle ready but not raised. When he reached the man, he found eyes that weren't filled with hate. They were filled with something worse: resignation. "American," the man whispered in accented English. Not a question, a statement. "Don't talk," Whitmore said, already assessing the wound. Gut shot, clean through. The man had hours at best. "I can get you across. West Germany, hospital." The man smiled and blood showed on his teeth. "No hospital fixes this, friend, but I give you something better than life. Save your strength." Dieter Kraus, the man tapped his own chest, wincing. Stasi. Was Stasi now just a man who wants to die clean? Whitmore pulled out his med kit, hands working automatically. Pressure bandage, morphine. Not enough. Never enough for wounds like this. "What were you running from?" "Same thing you run from." Dieter coughed and more blood came. "The men who make us into weapons, then act surprised when we cut them." His eyes focused, suddenly sharp despite the pain. "You are SEAL, yes? Special Operations?" "Can't confirm that." Dieter laughed, a wet sound. "I teach you something. Payment for trying to save enemy you should kill." "I'm listening." "In water, we call it Flussschleier, river veil." Dieter's hand moved to the water beside them, fingers trailing through the current. "The Stasi taught select operatives to fire from beneath the surface. Dissidents crossed rivers at night. We waited below. They never knew death came from the water itself." Whitmore's hand stilled on the bandage. "That's not possible." "Is very possible. And very terrible." Dieter grabbed Whitmore's wrist with surprising strength. "I teach you, but you must promise. Never for politics, never for power, only to protect, only to serve. This technique, it corrupts men who use it for wrong reasons. I know. It corrupted me." His grip tightened. "Promise me, American." Whitmore looked into the eyes of a dying man who'd killed God knows how many people and now wanted absolution through a promise. "I promise." For the next 40 minutes, as Dieter Kraus's life leaked out onto the muddy bank of the Elbe, he taught Lieutenant Garrett Whitmore a skill that shouldn't exist: how to read currents like a language, how to wrap a rifle in waterproof cloth tight enough to fire, loose enough to breathe, how to use hollow reeds for air, how to position yourself in the water's blind spots where refraction and darkness made you invisible, how to become a ghost made of river and shadow. When Dieter finally died, Whitmore closed the man's eyes and took his Stasi identification badge. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. He buried the body in the mud, marked the spot with stones only another operator would recognize as deliberate, and crossed back into West Germany with a secret that would follow him for the next 40 years. The last thing Dieter had said, barely a whisper, stayed with him. "This gift is also a curse. Choose your students carefully. Most men cannot carry this weight. Garrett Whitmore kept that promise for 4 decades, until he met Sloan Merrick. The rifle range at Camp Lejeune smelled like copper and gunpowder, a scent that lived in the walls and the dirt, and probably the souls of everyone who spent enough time there. The North Carolina sun hammered down on the concrete like it had a personal grudge against anything that stood upright. Sloan Merrick wiped sweat from her eyes and sighted down her M40A6, breathing slow and steady, feeling the rhythm of her pulse in her fingertips. 300 meters, wind coming from the east at about 8 miles per hour, temperature dropping as the afternoon wore on. Her target was a silhouette that didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't care if she hit it or not. She fired. The target's head exploded in a spray of paper and paste. "Dead center," her spotter said, not quite managing to hide the surprise in his voice. Corporal Jake Morrison had been spotting for her for 3 weeks and still seemed shocked every time she actually hit what she aimed at. "That's 47 for 50. "I know my count," Sloan said quietly, already adjusting for the next shot. She didn't say it mean, she just said it. Facts didn't need emotion attached to them. Morrison shifted beside her, uncomfortable in that way men get when they're not sure if a woman is allowed to be better than them at something they consider masculine. "Most of the guys are hitting maybe 35 out of 50 on a good day." "Most of the guys are rushing," Sloan fired again. Another hit. "They want to prove something. I just want to hit the target." "Yeah, but..." "Morrison." She finally looked at him, her eyes the color of storm clouds over the ocean. "You going to spot or you going to talk?" He spotted. Sloan Merrick was 29 years old and had been a Marine for 11 years, which meant she joined at 18 with ink barely dry on her high school diploma and a hole in her chest where her father used to be. She didn't talk about her father much. Didn't talk about much at all, really. The other Marines called her Ghost, and not just because she was a sniper. It was because she moved through the world like she was only halfway there. Like part of her was always somewhere else, standing beside a grave in Arlington National Cemetery, holding her mother's hand while they folded a flag that was supposed to mean something. Her father had been a Navy SEAL, Master Chief Thomas Merrick, killed in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2003, when an IED turned his Humvee into a fireball that they said he didn't suffer through. Sloan was 7 years old. She remembered the knock on the door, remembered the men in uniforms with faces like stone, remembered her mother's scream, the kind that starts in your chest and tears everything apart on the way out. She remembered her father teaching her to swim in the Chesapeake Bay the summer before he deployed, his hands under her back, keeping her afloat. "Water never lies, Sloan," he'd said. "Learn its language. It'll tell you everything you need to know." She'd been trying to learn that language ever since. The problem was, nobody else seemed to speak it. "Cease fire," the range master called, and Sloan cleared her weapon with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. She stood, slinging the rifle, and walked toward the ready room without waiting for Morrison to catch up. She knew what was coming. It always came. "Merrick." She stopped, turned. Gunnery Sergeant Decker Thorne stood in the doorway of the range office, arms crossed over a chest that looked like it had been carved from concrete and resentment in equal measure. 41 years old, 2 decades in the Corps, and absolutely certain that women in combat roles were a political stunt that was going to get real Marines killed. He'd made that opinion clear on day 1 of sniper school. "Gunny," Sloan said, neutral, always neutral with Thorne. 47 out of 50. He said it like an accusation. "You're shooting better than 70% of the class. Is that a problem, Gunny?" "It's interesting." Thorne walked closer, and Sloan held her ground. She'd learned early that backing up just made men like him push harder. "Makes me wonder if you're getting special attention, extra range time, someone giving you tips the rest of the class doesn't get." "I get the same hours as everyone else, Gunny. I just use them differently." "That right?" Thorne's eyes narrowed. Because I've seen shooters like you before. Natural talent only gets you so far. After that, you need something else. Experience. Time. Things that can't be rushed just because the Corps wants good optics for recruiting posters. Sloan met his stare without blinking. She'd learned that too. Men like Thorne respected eye contact, even if they hated what they saw in your eyes. With respect, Gunny, I'm here because I earned it, same as everyone else. We'll see. Thorne stepped back, dismissing her with the kind of gesture that said, this conversation wasn't over, just postponed. You've got classroom in 20. Don't be late. Sloan walked away, feeling his eyes on her back like a rifle sight. She didn't let her shoulders tense, didn't let her pace quicken, just walked like a woman who had nothing to prove and nowhere she needed to be except exactly where she was going. But inside, where the anger lived, she felt it burning. Not at Thorne. She'd known men like him her whole life. The anger was at the fact that it was 2024 and she was still having to prove she deserved to be in the same room as men who couldn't outshoot her on their best day. She found a quiet corner of the barracks and sat on her rack, the springs creaking under her weight. Her footlocker sat at the end of the bed, standard issue green with her name stenciled in black letters. Inside, wrapped in an old t-shirt, was a small wooden box. She opened it. Her father's Navy cross lay inside, the ribbon faded but the metal still bright. Next to it was a photo of him in his SEAL Team 3 uniform, desert camouflage, and a smile that made him look younger than she was now. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, Tom Merrick, Bagram Airfield, 2002, 1 year before we lost him. Sloan traced the edge of the metal with one finger, not picking it up. She'd held it once, at the funeral, when the admiral presenting it had placed it in her small hands and said something about honor and sacrifice and service. She'd been 7. She hadn't understood the words. She just understood that her father wasn't coming home. I'm trying, Dad, she whispered to the photo. I'm trying to do it right. The photo didn't answer. It never did. Colonel Garrett Whitmore, now known as Ironside to everyone who'd served with him, retired from the United States Navy in 2020 after 37 years of service that took him to every corner of Earth where America decided it needed to plant its flag. He had 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Silver Stars, a Navy Cross, and a chest full of ribbons that represented operations he still couldn't talk about in public. His hands shook sometimes, not from age but from nerve damage, courtesy of a fragmentation grenade in Fallujah. His left knee was titanium from an accident in Somalia that the official record called training-related because the truth was classified. He was 67 years old and should have been on a beach somewhere, fishing and pretending the world didn't need him anymore. Instead, he was standing in front of a classroom full of Marine Scout sniper students at Camp Lejeune, invited back as a subject matter expert consultant, which was military speak for old man who knows things we've forgotten. River crossings, he said, his voice still carrying that command presence that made junior officers stand straighter without thinking about it. You've been taught to avoid them, to go around, over, under, anything but through. And that's good advice 99% of the time. He clicked to the next slide. A grainy photo of a river at night, nothing but darkness and the suggestion of water. But sometimes you can't go around. Sometimes the river is the mission. And when that happens, you need to understand that water isn't just an obstacle. It's an environment. It has rules, physics, behavior patterns. And if you learn those rules, water becomes an asset instead of a threat. The students were paying attention in that way Marines do when they're not sure if information is going to save their lives someday, but they're taking notes just in case. All except one. The young woman in the 3rd row wasn't taking notes. She was staring at the photo on the screen like she could see something in it that nobody else could. Her eyes tracked across the dark water, reading it, and Ironside recognized that look because he'd seen it in exactly one other person in his entire career. Dieter Kraus, dying on a riverbank in East Germany, teaching a skill that shouldn't exist. After the class, Ironside made a point of checking the roster. Corporal Sloan Merrick, age 29, Scout Sniper School, Week 6. Evaluation scores: above average on all technical skills, exceptional on long-range accuracy and environmental observation. Notation from her primary instructor: demonstrates unusual patience and environmental awareness, highly self-disciplined. Some friction with leadership due to gender dynamics. That last line made Ironside's jaw tighten. He'd spent 37 years in an institution that treated women like they were visiting from another planet. And he'd watched good operators get sidelined because people like Decker Thorne thought having a uterus made you tactically incompetent. But that wasn't what made him pay attention to Sloan Merrick. What made him pay attention was the way she'd looked at that river photo like she was listening to it. Sloan found him 2 days later, during the break between practical exercises and classroom instruction. The shooting range was empty except for the two of them, and Ironside was running through rifle maintenance with the kind of muscle memory that comes from doing something so many times your hands know the movements better than your brain does. "Colonel Whitmore," he looked up. Sloan Merrick stood 3 paces away, at parade rest without making it look formal. Just a woman standing with a kind of balance that came from understanding her own center of gravity. "Corporal Merrick," he set down the bolt assembly. "Something I can help you with?" "Your lecture on river operations." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You talked about reading water, not just currents and depths, but patterns, behavior." "That's right. My father taught me something similar when I was a kid. He said water has a language, that if you listen, it tells you what it's going to do before it does it." Ironside's hand stilled. "Your father was Navy?" "SEAL, Master Chief Thomas Merrick. He died in Afghanistan, 2003. She said it without emotion, just fact. But Ironside had been to enough funerals to hear what lived under facts like that. "I knew Tom Merrick." The words came out before Ironside thought about them. "Not well, different teams, different eras, but I knew him. He was a good operator, better man." Sloane's composure cracked for just a second, something raw flashing across her face before she locked it down again. "You knew him." "I did. And if he taught you to read water, then he taught you something most people never learn." Ironside stood, his bad knee complaining but not enough to make him wince where someone could see. "You've got a gift, Corporal. I saw it in my lecture, the way you looked at that photo." "Gunny Thorne thinks I'm here for diversity metrics." "Gunny Thorne thinks a lot of things that don't match reality." Ironside kept his voice level, professional, but there was steel underneath. "The question isn't what he thinks, it's what you know, and what you're willing to learn." Sloan met his eyes, and for a long moment, they just looked at each other. Two people who'd lost things to service and somehow kept serving anyway. Two people who understood that some skills weren't about strength or speed or who could yell the loudest. "I want to learn," Sloan said quietly. "Whatever you're willing to teach." Ironside thought about Dieter Krauss, thought about the promise he'd made on a muddy riverbank 41 years ago. Thought about the one other student he'd trained in Rivervale 12 years back, and how badly that had ended. Thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then he thought about Tom Merrick, teaching his daughter to swim in the Chesapeake, passing on a language that most people never heard. "Meet me at the Potomac Inlet," Ironside said, "Saturday, 0500. Bring a wetsuit and a rifle, you don't mind getting wet. Tell no one. This stays between us." "What are we doing?" "Something your father would have wanted you to know." Ironside picked up his rifle assembly again, hands moving automatically, "and something that might get us both court-martialed if anyone finds out." Sloan nodded once and left without another word. Ironside watched her go and wondered if he was about to make the same mistake twice. But something Tom Merrick had said once, at some bar in Virginia Beach after too many beers, came back to him. The best operators aren't the ones who can shoot straight. They're the ones who know when not to shoot at all. Sloane Merrick had that in her. He'd seen it in her eyes. Now he just had to teach her how to use it. The training started before dawn on a Saturday in March, when the Potomac was still cold enough to hurt, and the fog came off the water like smoke from a fire nobody could see. Sloane showed up at 04:55 in a wetsuit that had seen better days, her rifle wrapped in waterproof cloth and strapped to her back, her face set in that expression of determined calm that Ironside recognized from every operator who'd ever done something dangerous and known exactly how dangerous it was. "You told anyone about this?" Ironside asked. "No, sir." "Good, because if this gets out, I lose my consultant contract and you lose your career. Maybe we both catch charges. The Corps doesn't officially acknowledge what I'm about to teach you." "Understood, sir." Ironside gestured toward the river. "Your father taught you to read water. I'm going to teach you to become it, to hide in it, to use it as a weapon when every other option is gone." He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. "This technique comes from East Germany, Cold War era, Stasi, secret police. They used it to kill dissidents trying to cross rivers at night. The man who taught me was dying when he did it, trying to make peace with what he'd done with this skill." Sloane listened without interrupting, her eyes on the dark water. "I've taught this once before," Ironside continued, "12 years ago, to someone I thought had the discipline and the spirit to carry it responsibly. I was wrong. She disappeared, and I spent a decade wondering if she was using Rivervale to kill people for money, if I'd created a monster. Why teach me then? Because your father was a good man, because I see something in you that I didn't see in her, and because some knowledge is too dangerous to die with one person. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, Rivervale dies with me, and despite its history, despite what it was created for, it's also saved lives, including mine. Twice." Sloane nodded slowly. "What do I need to do?" "First, get in the water. Feel the current. Don't fight it. Don't ignore it. Become part of it." For the next 6 months, every Saturday and Sunday before dawn, Sloane Merrick learned things that weren't in any manual. She learned how to read the surface tension of water and predict where refraction would hide her outline. She learned how to breathe through hollow reeds while submerged, slow and steady, no panic, just discipline. She learned how to wrap a rifle in waxed cloth, tight enough to keep water out, but loose enough to tear away in one motion. She learned how to position herself in a river's blind spots, where darkness and depth and the angle of observation made her invisible, even to trained eyes looking directly at her. She learned how to kill from a place where death wasn't supposed to come from. But more than that, she learned why not to. "This isn't about being a better shooter," Ironside told her one morning in July, both of them waist-deep in the Potomac, the sun just starting to burn off the fog. "Any idiot with a rifle and enough practice can kill someone. This is about being somewhere your enemy doesn't expect, can't predict, and won't see until it's too late. That kind of advantage is intoxicating. It makes you feel like a god." He grabbed her shoulder, made her look at him. "But it also makes you dangerous to everyone, including yourself. The woman I trained before you? She was better than you technically, faster, more precise, but she loved the power too much. She loved being invisible, and that love turned her into something that shouldn't exist." "How do I avoid that?" Sloane asked. "By remembering what your father taught you. Water never lies, and neither should you. This technique is for protecting others, not killing them. For getting into a position where you can save lives, not take them. The second you start using Rivervale for personal gain, for revenge, for anything except service to something bigger than yourself, you've lost your way." Sloane thought about her father's Navy Cross, sitting in a box in her footlocker. Thought about the promise she'd made at his grave when she was 7 years old, and didn't understand what promises meant. "I understand, sir." "I hope so, Corporal, because I'm trusting you with something that could get a lot of people killed if it's used wrong. Don't make me regret that trust." She didn't respond, just nodded and sank back beneath the surface, her breathing tube barely visible among the reeds, her outline disappearing into the water's darkness like she'd never been there at all. By September, Sloane Merrick had mastered a skill that only 3 people in the world knew existed. Dieter Krauss, dead for 40 years, Garrett Whitmore, 67 and running out of time, and one other person who'd vanished into the shadows 12 years ago. A woman named Dr. Vera Ashford, who Ironside hoped was dead but suspected was very much alive, and using Rivervale for everything it was never supposed to be used for. The deployment orders came in October. MARSOC Team Razor, Syria, Joint Task Force operation targeting ISIS weapons caches along the Euphrates River. Sloane read the briefing packet in her barracks room and felt something cold settle in her chest. Euphrates River, water operations, high-risk environment. She called Ironside from a secure line. "I'm deploying, Syria, river operations." Silence on the other end, long enough that she thought the connection had dropped. Then, "When?" "Wheels up in 72 hours. "Who's your team lead?" "Gunnery Sergeant Decker Thorne." More silence. Then Ironside's voice, careful and controlled. "Listen to me very carefully, Corporal. Rivervale is not for combat operations. It's not for proving yourself to men like Thorne. It's a tool of absolute last resort. You understand?" "Yes, sir." "I mean it, Sloane. You use this in the field, and questions get asked. Questions lead to investigations. Investigations lead to both of us in a cell somewhere, explaining why we were teaching classified East German assassination techniques to active duty Marines." "I understand, sir, but if the situation calls for it, you make the call. You're the one in the field. You're the one who has to live with the consequences." Ironside's voice softened, just slightly. "Your father would be proud of you, not because you're a sniper, because you're the kind of person who learns dangerous things and carries them with humility. That's rare. Don't lose it." "I won't, sir." "And Sloane, watch your back with Thorne. Men like him are dangerous when they feel threatened." The line went dead. 3 days later, she was on a C-130 flying east into a war zone, her rifle between her knees, and Gunnery Sergeant Decker Thorne sitting across from her with an expression that said he was already planning how to write her up for the first mistake she made. The Euphrates River waited in the darkness, carrying secrets that hadn't surfaced yet. But they would, soon. The Euphrates River cut through the Syrian night like a blade made of darkness and ancient memory. It had been here for thousands of years, watching empires rise and fall, carrying the dead and the living with equal indifference. Tonight it carried something else, a threat that moved beneath its surface like a ghost made of water and malice. Sloane Merrick crouched on the rocky ridge above the river, her rifle steady against her shoulder, her breathing slow and measured. The rest of MARSOC Team Razor spread out in tactical formation around her, 12 operators moving with the kind of practiced silence that came from training and experience, and the knowledge that noise got you killed in places like this. Gunnery Sergeant Decker Thorne moved at point, his bulk somehow graceful in the darkness, every step deliberate. He'd made his opinion of Sloane clear during the flight over, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's here because Washington wants good press. Female Marine in combat. Makes for great recruiting posters. Just keep her alive and out of the way, and we'll all get home with our careers intact." Nobody had disagreed with him, not out loud. Captain Royce Kellerman had given Sloane a look that might have been sympathy or might have been pity. He was 37, career Marine, the kind of officer who actually read after-action reports and sometimes listened when junior enlisted had ideas. But even he wasn't going to buck Thorne's authority over something as trivial as hurt feelings. The mission was simple on paper. Intelligence had located an ISIS weapons cache in a compound 2 clicks from the river. Team Razor was supposed to infiltrate, secure the cache, and extract before anyone knew they'd been there. Standard direct action. In and out. Routine, except nothing in Syria was routine anymore. Sloane studied the terrain below, her eyes tracking the landscape the way her father had taught her, the way Ironside had refined over 6 months of training that officially never happened. The river moved wrong. Not obviously, not in a way that would trigger most people's awareness, but the current had a pattern, and something was interrupting that pattern about 40 meters upstream from their planned crossing point. She keyed her radio, voice barely above a whisper. Razor 6, Ghost, something's off in the water. Pattern disruption, 40 meters north of our position. Static. Then Thorne's voice, thick with contempt. Ghost, Razor 6, what the hell is pattern disruption? The current's being interrupted. Something's moving against the natural flow. You see something with your thermals? Sloane checked her optic. Nothing but water and rocks, same as it had been for the last 10 minutes. Negative, but the water movement. Then we're clear. Stop reading tea leaves and stay alert for actual threats. Captain Kellerman's voice cut in, more diplomatic. Ghost, Razor 5, can you specify what you're observing? Sloane chose her words carefully. She couldn't tell them she'd spent 6 months learning to read water like a language. Couldn't explain that she'd been trained to spot exactly this kind of disturbance. Sir, the surface tension is wrong. Something below the waterline is creating microwakes that don't match wind or natural current. Jesus Christ, Thorne muttered, not bothering to key off his radio. She sees ghosts in the water now. Typical rookie overthinking. Everyone stay tight on me. We're moving to the rally point. The team moved forward, and Sloane had exactly 3 seconds to decide whether to follow orders or trust her instincts. 3 seconds to choose between being a good Marine and being right. She followed orders. 30 seconds later, the night exploded. The shot came from nowhere and everywhere at once. A crack that echoed off the rocks and sent every operator dropping to cover before conscious thought caught up with training. Corporal Danny Vega hit the ground hard, screaming, clutching his thigh where a round had punched through the meat of his leg and shattered the femur underneath. Contact! Thorne's voice bellowed across the radio. Multiple positions. Return fire on the ridge line. Chaos rolled through the patrol like a wave. Rifles swung toward the cliffs, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness, spent brass hitting stone with a sound like rain on metal. Everyone was shooting at shadows because nobody could see the actual threat. Everyone except Sloane. She stayed low, controlling her breathing, filtering out the noise and the panic and the screaming. Her eyes went to the river, tracking back to where she'd seen the pattern disruption. The water there looked different now, smoother, like something had just disturbed it and was letting it settle back to calm. Contact left, cliffs. Negative contact. Where the hell is he? Can't get a visual. Where's the shooter? A second shot cracked through the darkness, and Captain Kellerman's helmet suddenly had a bright silver gouge across the side, where a bullet had missed killing him by less than an inch. He stumbled, stunned, hands going to his head to check that his skull was still intact. Jesus! Jesus! The team medic, Corporal Miguel Santiago, rushed forward to check on Kellerman, and a third shot punched him square in the chest plate. The impact threw him backward like he'd been hit by a truck, ribs cracking under Kevlar that was supposed to stop bullets, but couldn't stop the kinetic energy behind them. He lay gasping, trying to pull air into lungs that didn't want to work anymore. Panic grew teeth and claws. Voices overlapped on the radio, discipline fracturing under the weight of an enemy they couldn't see and couldn't fight. Where's the shooter? We can't see anything. This is impossible. Nobody shoots like this. Check the cliffs. Thermals. Someone give me a thermal reading. Sloane tuned it all out. She went to that quiet place her father had taught her, the place where fear didn't live and panic couldn't reach. She became still, not frozen, still. There was a difference. Frozen meant you'd stop thinking. Still meant you were thinking so clearly that movement was unnecessary. She watched the river. 40 meters upstream, barely visible in the darkness, the water's surface showed a tiny disturbance. Not a splash, not a wake, just a smooth patch that shouldn't exist. A place where something had broken the surface tension and was now letting it reform. And beneath that smooth patch, barely visible even to eyes trained to see it, was a shimmer, a distortion, the faint outline of something that might be vegetation, or might be camouflage, or might be a human being positioned in the water exactly where every law of physics said a human being couldn't shoot from. River veil. Sloane's pulse hammered once, hard, then settled back to steady. She'd never seen it used in combat, had never seen anyone except Ironside demonstrate it. But she knew what she was looking at because she'd spent 6 months learning how to do exactly this. Someone else knew Rivervale. Someone else had learned from Ironside, and they were using it to kill her team. Razor 6, Ghost. Her voice cut through the chaos, calm and clear. Shooter is in the water, submerged position, 40 meters upstream from rally point, drifting left with the current. What? Thorne's voice was pure disbelief and rage. Nobody shoots from water. Find the actual position. Sir, I have eyes on. Thermal negative because their temperature matched to the water. Visual is distortion and surface disruption. Shooter is submerged. I'm engaging. She didn't wait for permission. Waiting meant more people died. Sloane sighted on the shimmer, leading it slightly to account for current drift, and fired 3 rounds in rapid succession. The shots hit the water inches from the distortion, close enough that whoever was down there would feel the pressure waves, close enough to force a reaction. The reaction came. A shape broke the surface for just a second, fast and fluid, shedding water like a seal coming up for air. Vegetation camouflage, compact frame, breathing apparatus snapping free, and beneath the camo, for just a fraction of a heartbeat, Sloane saw a face. Female, young, eyes that burned with something that might have been rage or purpose, or the kind of certainty that came from believing you were doing God's work. Then the rest of Team Razor opened fire, and the river erupted in a storm of bullets that chewed the water into foam and sent geysers of spray 6 feet into the air. The shape disappeared, sinking back into the darkness like it had never existed. And the shooting stopped only when magazines ran dry, and the night went silent except for the ringing in everyone's ears. Sloane's radio crackled, breathing, heavy breathing. Then Thorne's voice, dangerous and quiet. Ghost, Razor 6, how did you know that? She'd known this moment was coming, had known it since she first spotted the water disruption, had known it with absolute certainty the second she saw Rivervale used in combat and recognized it for what it was. Training, Gunny, environmental observation. Nobody trains to spot underwater shooters, Corporal. That's not a thing. That doesn't exist. Captain Kellerman's voice cut in, still shaky from his near-death experience, but thinking clearly enough to recognize that this conversation was about to go somewhere dangerous. Secure the perimeter first. Questions later. Santiago, how bad are you hit? Ribs, Santiago gasped. Maybe 3, 4 broken. Can't breathe deep. Vega? Legs fucked, sir. Vega groaned through gritted teeth. Can't put weight on it. Need exfil. Copy. Razor 6, we need medevac at the rally point. 2 casualties, 1 urgent. But Thorne wasn't done. His voice came back, cold and focused. That shot pattern, that breathing discipline, that's not regular sniper training. That's something specific, something specialized. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sloane said nothing. The team moved into defensive positions, weapons trained on the river. Everyone's nerves wound tight enough to snap. Nobody else spoke, but she could feel their eyes on her. Questions forming, suspicions growing like cancer. And then her wrist device vibrated. A notification. Encrypted channel, no sender ID. The kind of message that came through secure military networks but wasn't on any official log. She waited until Kellerman was coordinating the medevac. until Thorne was focused on defensive positions, until nobody was watching her. Then she checked the message. 4 words in plain text. River remembers, little sister. Sloane's blood went cold. She deleted the message instantly, muscle memory taking over before conscious thought. But her hands shook. Just for a second. Just long enough. Long enough for Thorne to see it. His eyes locked on her from across the perimeter, and she watched his expression change from suspicion to certainty. The medevac helicopter came 30 minutes later, rotors beating the air like thunder, dust and noise and the kind of chaos that made thinking impossible. Vega and Santiago were loaded onto stretchers and lifted away, and Team Razor collapsed back to their forward operating base with 2 fewer operators and a mystery that felt like poison spreading through the unit. Nobody talked on the way back. They just walked through the darkness, weapons ready, eyes scanning for threats that might come from any direction, including from within. The safe house was a gutted building that smelled like old smoke and defeat, walls pocked with bullet holes from wars nobody remembered anymore. A single electric bulb swinging from a wire and casting shadows that looked like ghosts. Team Razor filled the main room, stripping gear, checking weapons, moving with the kind of exhausted efficiency that came after missions where everything went wrong, but nobody died. Yet, Sloane sat in the far corner on an overturned crate, methodically field-stripping her rifle. Her hands moved with practiced precision, muscle memory taking over while her mind worked through scenarios, improbabilities, and the weight of secrets that were getting heavier by the minute. She didn't look up when Thorne started pacing, didn't react when his voice rose, anger and humiliation mixing into something toxic. "I'm telling you," Thorne said, stabbing a finger in her general direction without saying her name. She knew something. Nobody calls a shot from underwater unless they've seen it before. Prior contact, maybe. Hell, maybe more than contact. The younger operators exchanged uncertain looks. Morrison spoke up tentatively. "But Gunny, she called the position right. If she was working with whoever that was, then she knew exactly where the shooter would be because she helped plan it." Thorne rounded on him. "Think about it. We're ambushed by someone using a technique that doesn't officially exist. Our newest team member, who everyone questions whether she should even be here, somehow spots the threat before anyone else, then gets a message on her device right after. You think that's coincidence?" Sloane continued cleaning her rifle, the cloth running down the barrel with steady, even strokes. She'd learned a long time ago that engaging with men like Thorne only made things worse. Better to stay quiet, stay focused, let them talk themselves out. But Kellerman wasn't letting it go unchallenged. "Gunny, that's a serious accusation. Corporal Merrick saved lives tonight. Without her call, we'd still be shooting at empty ridgelines while someone picked us off from the water." Or, Thorne countered, she made the call because she knew the plan and needed to look like a hero when it went sideways. That's conspiracy theory bullshit. Is it? Thorne folded his arms. Morrison mentioned seeing a female silhouette rise from that water. Anyone else notice Ghost flinch when they said that? The room went quiet. Every eye turned to Sloane. She'd paused for just a fraction of a second when Morrison had mentioned the female figure. Barely noticeable, involuntary, the kind of micro-expression that most people would miss. But Thorne had been watching for it, and he saw. Kellerman stepped forward, his voice careful. "Corporal Merrick, is there something you want to tell us?" Sloane looked up from her rifle, meeting his eyes. She saw intelligence there, fairness, a willingness to listen, but she also saw the weight of command, the knowledge that if she admitted knowing anything about Rivervale, about her training with Ironside, about the secret that could end both their careers, Kellerman would have no choice but to report it up the chain. "No, sir," she said quietly. "Nothing to tell." "See that?" Thorne's voice dripped with vindication. "She's lying. Look at her. She knows something." Sloane finished reassembling her rifle, set it aside, and stood. Her shirt shifted as she moved, riding up slightly on her left side, just enough to reveal a small tattoo on her ribs, a pattern of ripples spreading from a single point, delicate lines that look like disturbed water captured in ink. Thorne's eyes locked on it. What the hell is that? Nothing, Gunny. That's not nothing. That's a river pattern. You walking around with water tattoos now? That's some kind of badge? Sloane pulled her shirt down, her jaw tight. The tattoo had been a mistake. She'd gotten it 6 years ago, before Ironside, before Rivervale, back when it just represented her father's lessons about reading water. But now, in this context, with these accusations flying, it looked like proof of something darker. It's personal, she said, not relevant to this mission. Kellerman held up a hand before Thorne could respond. Everyone stand down. We're all running on adrenaline and zero sleep. Corporal Merrick, you're confined to this compound until we can sort this out. No comms, no outside contact. Clear? Clear, sir. Gunny, you've made your concerns noted. I'll be filing a report with S2. If there's something here, intelligence will find it. He looked around the room. Until then, we maintain operational security and unit cohesion. Nobody talks about what happened tonight outside this room. Understood? A chorus of, "Yes, sir," echoed through the space, but Sloane could hear the doubt underneath. She was no longer one of them. She was a question mark, a liability, a problem that needed solving. Hours passed. The sun came up, brutal and hot. Sloane didn't move from her corner, just sat with her thoughts and the weight of secrets that were getting harder to carry. The door slammed open before noon. 2 people walked in, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Special Agent Cassidy Brennan, FBI Counterintelligence, walked straight to Sloane. "Corporal Sloane Merrick, you're coming with me." The interrogation room was exactly what Sloane expected. Bare concrete walls, one metal chair bolted to the floor, a single bulb overhead that flickered just enough to be disorienting. Agent Brennan didn't sit. She stood, arms crossed, while her partner set up a tablet. They let the silence stretch, waiting to see if Sloane would fill the quiet with nervous talking. She didn't. She just sat with her hands folded in her lap, breathing steady, and waited. Brennan went first. "Let's establish some basic facts, Corporal. 3 months ago, Senator Thomas Halstead was killed in Washington, D.C., shot from the Potomac River. The round came from a position in the water itself, submerged, at night. No shell casings recovered, no physical evidence, just a dead senator with a hole in his head." Sloane said nothing. 6 weeks later, General Patrick Moreau was killed near the Georgetown waterfront. Same M.O. Underwater shot, night, no physical evidence. Still nothing. 3 weeks ago, CIA Deputy Director Helen Cross was assassinated at the tidal basin. Same shooter, same technique, same result. Brennan leaned forward. "And then tonight, in Syria, your team gets ambushed by someone using the exact same methodology. Someone you were able to identify when nobody else could. Interesting coincidence, don't you think?" "I read the water," Sloane said quietly. "Environmental observation. Show me where in Marine Scout sniper training they teach you to spot underwater shooters." "They don't. My father taught me to read water patterns when I was a kid. I applied that knowledge tonight." Brennan's smile was cold. "Your father, very sympathetic, but it doesn't explain how you identified a technique that officially doesn't exist." She nodded to her partner, who projected an image on the wall. Classified documents, technical schematics, diagrams showing submerged firing positions. River Vale, laid out in bureaucratic detail. This is classified material, originated from debriefings of Eastern Bloc defectors in the 1980s. Only a handful of people have ever had access to these files, and according to our network logs, you're one of them. Sloane's stomach dropped. "That's not possible. I've never accessed classified." "Your credentials were used." Brennan pulled up a screen full of data, login times, file accesses, Timestamps showing Sloane's military ID pulling up Rivervale documentation. March through September of last year, regular access, almost like someone was studying it. Those logs are fabricated. Anyone with system access could create false records. Anyone could, Brennan agreed. But why would they use yours specifically? She pulled up another screen. GPS tracking data. These are location logs from your wrist device. You were in D.C. on the dates of all three assassinations. Near the Potomac, when Halstead died. Near Georgetown, when Moreau was hit. At the tidal basin 12 hours before Director Cross was killed. I was never in D.C. during those windows. I was at Camp Lejeune. We checked. According to base logs, you took personal leave during all three dates. Brennan's voice was flat, devastating. Sloane's mind raced. Someone had access to her credentials. Someone had created a paper trail. Someone had been planning this for months. Brennan dropped a folder on the floor. It burst open, spilling photographs, crime scenes, bodies, blood, and tactical sketches showing submerged firing positions with perfect angles. Sloane's handwriting, or close enough. We found these in your footlocker at Camp Lejeune, along with a disassembled trigger device. Care to explain? Those aren't mine. Someone planted them. Naturally. And the encrypted messages you received tonight? I don't know what those messages were or who sent them, but you deleted them immediately. The walls felt like they were closing in. Every piece of evidence pointed at Sloane. Someone had spent months building this trap. Brennan pulled up a final image. The female silhouette from the river, captured from helmet cameras. Grainy but clear enough to see the compact frame, the way she moved in the water with skill that came from extensive training. Here's what I think, Brennan said. I think you and this woman are working together. I think you've been using Rivervale to assassinate officials. I think tonight was supposed to be another operation, but it went sideways. So you had to pivot, look like a hero, maintain your cover. That's not what happened. Then tell me what did happen. Tell me how you knew to look in the water. Tell me who taught you Rivervale. Sloane opened her mouth, closed it. Every answer led to Ironside. Every truth exposed the training that was supposed to stay secret. I want a lawyer, she said finally. You'll get one, after you answer my questions. Brennan leaned close. Corporal, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know when someone's guilty, and I know when someone's being set up. Right now, all the evidence says you're guilty, but my gut says you're being played. Help me understand which one is true. For a moment, Sloane almost broke, almost told her everything. But then she thought about Ironside's words. This technique dies with us. I have nothing to say without legal counsel. Brennan straightened, disappointment and anger mixing. Fine. Corporal Sloane Merrick, you are hereby restricted to this compound, pending investigation. All weapons, gear, and communications devices are to be surrendered immediately. Any violation will result in immediate detention. Do you understand? I understand, ma'am. The door opened. Sloane walked out into the main room where her entire team waited. Thorne looked triumphant. Kellerman looked torn. The younger operators looked confused and betrayed. She placed her rifle on the table, then her sidearm, then her knife, then her communications device. Piece by piece, the tools that defined her service were stripped away. For the first time since joining the Marines 11 years ago, Sloane Merrick felt naked and alone and scared, but not broken, not yet. The safe house sounded different by morning, quieter, heavier, the kind of silence that clings to walls after a long night of doubt and accusation. Sloane sat alone at a table near the back, stripped of everything that made her a Marine, except the uniform on her back. Thorne leaned against a pillar across the room, wearing a smirk that said he believed the story was already written. The younger operators whispered, casting glances at her like she was something fragile or dangerous. Then, at 0847 hours, the door opened and the air shifted. Colonel Garrett Whitmore stepped through the door and the entire room snapped to attention. He was 67 years old and looked every day of it in the best possible way. Silver hair cut military short, weathered face, uniform crisp, chest carrying ribbons from 4 decades of operations. His left knee moved stiffly, his hands showed faint tremor, but his eyes were sharp, clear. Ironside didn't look at any of them. He walked straight toward Sloane, not with pity, but with respect. Sloane exhaled once, quietly, the only sign she'd been waiting for him. Agent Brennan stepped forward. "Colonel Whitmore, this is an ongoing investigation. You weren't invited." Ironside didn't slow. "I wasn't invited to half the wars I showed up to, Agent. Didn't stop me then." Brennan stiffened. "Your protege is connected to multiple homicides. She's demonstrated knowledge of a classified technique." He cut her off with a single word. "No." The firmness in his voice silenced the entire room. Ironside reached Sloane's table and placed one hand on its edge. "You okay?" She nodded once. "Yes, sir." He turned to face Brennan and the assembled team. "She is the one who saved your entire unit last night, not the one who put them at risk." The room froze. Thorne opened his mouth, but Kellerman shot him a look that shut him up. Ironside continued, his tone even but unyielding. "None of you saw the shooter. None of you recognized the pattern. None of you understood what was happening in that water. She did. She called the threat. She prevented more casualties. And she did it while being doubted at every turn." Brennan folded her arms. "That doesn't erase the evidence." "The evidence is staged," Ironside said flatly. "And I know because I've seen this before." He pulled a folder from inside his jacket and dropped it on the table with a heavy thud. 12 years ago, I trained someone in a specialized reconnaissance technique, Rivervale. Learned it from an East German Stasi defector in 1983. It's a method of submerged operations that allows an operative to fire from beneath the waterline without detection. The room went dead silent. "The woman I trained was brilliant, driven, skilled. Her name was Dr. Vera Ashford. Her father was CIA, killed in Prague in 2012 under circumstances the agency called a training accident. Vera believed it was assassination, covered up. She came to me wanting to learn invisibility. I thought she wanted to serve. I was wrong." Ironside's jaw tightened. "I terminated her training after 8 months when I realized she wasn't learning to protect. She was learning to punish. She disappeared. I assumed she'd moved on. Clearly, I was wrong." Brennan's expression shifted from hostile to calculating. "You're saying this Vera Ashford is the shooter." "I'm saying Vera Ashford is using Rivervale to assassinate officials she believes were complicit in her father's death. And she's framing Corporal Merrick because Merrick is the only other person I've trained in the technique." He pulled out another sheet. "This is a tactical diagram found in Corporal Merrick's gear. That's evidence. It's a forgery." Ironside's voice cracked like a whip. "The handwriting style is mine, not hers. Vera studied my training materials for 8 months. She knows my notation system. She copied it to frame Merrick, but she made mistakes. The angle calculations are wrong. The current drift measurements use metric instead of imperial. I've never used metric. Merrick wouldn't either because I taught her my system." He pointed to specific marks. "This notation here, that's how I marked breathing points in 1995. I changed that methodology in 2003. Vera wouldn't know that because she trained with me in 2013 using the updated system. But someone copying my old training materials would make exactly this mistake." The room rippled with realization, doubt, understanding. Brennan took the diagram, studying it with new eyes. "Why didn't Corporal Merrick explain this herself?" "Because explaining it would mean revealing that I trained her, which would mean revealing that Rivervale exists as an active technique, which would mean both of us facing charges." Ironside met her stare without flinching. "She chose to protect me. That's the kind of operator she is." Kellerman's eyes turned toward Sloane with something new. Understanding. He saw her differently now. The quiet confidence, the instincts, the discipline. And Thorn. Thorn looked like the ground had shifted under him. Ironside placed a hand on Sloane's shoulder. She doesn't deserve suspicion. She deserves an apology. No one spoke, not because they feared Ironside, but because in that moment, they finally understood who Sloane Merrick truly was. But Brennan wasn't done. If everything you're saying is true, Colonel, then we have a bigger problem. Vera Ashford has killed 3 officials. She's using a technique that makes her nearly impossible to detect, and only 3 people know how to counter her. You, Corporal Merrick, and Vera herself. 2 people, Ironside corrected. I'm 67 with a titanium knee and nerve damage. I can advise. I can't operate. It's on Merrick. All eyes turned to Sloane. She stood slowly. What's Vera's target list? Ironside pulled out another document. I've been tracking her for 8 years. Every official she's killed was connected to her father's death. Senator Halstead chaired the intelligence committee that approved the Prague operation. General Moreau commanded the unit. Director Cross signed off on the cover-up. The pattern is revenge, systematic and surgical. How many targets are left? 2. Admiral Theodore Parks, who was Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence in 2012 and provided the tactical assessment that sent her father into Prague. He's giving the keynote address at the Naval Academy graduation in Annapolis, 72 hours from now. And the 5th? Ironside's expression went flat. Me, I'm the one who taught her Rivervale in the first place. In her mind, I'm complicit. I gave her the weapon. I just refused to aim it for her. Brennan stepped forward. We locked down Annapolis, cancel the ceremony. Won't work, Sloane said quietly. Vera's been planning this for years. She'll adapt. Go to ground. Wait, if we want to stop her permanently, we do it at Annapolis, where she's expecting to operate, where we can control the environment. You want to use the Admiral as bait, Kellerman said. I want to stop a killer who's better than anyone in this room. And the only way to do that is to be where she is, using the same technique she uses before she takes her shot. Thorne finally found his voice, uncertain now. You're talking about going into the water, hunting her in her own element. I'm talking about doing what I was trained to do, Sloane looked at Ironside, with Colonel Whitmore's guidance. Brennan shook her head. Absolutely not. We have protocols, procedures. Your protocols can't see her, Sloane said factually. Your procedures didn't stop her from killing 3 people. You want to stop her, you use me, or you don't stop her at all. The silence was thick. Finally, Kellerman spoke. I'll support it. Corporal Merrick's instincts saved my life. I trust them again. One by one, the other operators nodded, even Thorne, reluctantly. Brennan stared at Sloane for a long moment. You go in with full surveillance, body cam, tracking device, armed escort on shore. The second this goes sideways, we pull you out. Understood? Understood, ma'am. And Colonel, you're coming with us. You know how Vera thinks. You keep her alive or I charge you both after this is over. Ironside smiled slightly. Wouldn't have it any other way, Agent. The next 72 hours blurred into chaos of planning and preparation. Ironside and Sloane worked together in a secured room at Quantico, going over tactical assessments and environmental factors. They studied maps of Annapolis, focusing on the Severn River's topography, current patterns, water temperature, sight lines from the Naval Academy Stadium. Vera will position here, Ironside said, pointing to a section with good cover and perfect angles. Deep enough to hide, shallow enough to maneuver, current flows left to right at approximately 2 knots. She'll drift with it, making micro adjustments. Sloane studied the map. She'll have a backup plan, an automated system in case she's compromised. Agreed. Look for anchor cables, submerged equipment, anything that doesn't belong. What if I can't stop her? Ironside met her eyes. Then you do what I taught you. You make the hard choice. Rivervale was never about killing Sloan, but sometimes stopping a killer means being willing to become one. Can you do that? Sloan thought about her father, about the Navy Cross, about the promise she'd made at his grave. If I have to, good, but try not to. Vera's lost, broken, but she's not beyond redemption. Your father understood that. So do I. So, I think, do you. They trained in the Potomac at night, running scenarios until Sloane's muscles screamed. Ironside watched from shore, calling out adjustments, pushing her harder than she'd ever been pushed. On the third night, Sloane surfaced after a brutal drill, gasping, shaking from cold and exhaustion. Ironside was waiting with a thermal blanket and coffee. "You're ready," he said. "I don't feel ready." "Nobody ever does. That's how you know it matters." He sat beside her. 12 years ago, I failed Vera. I saw the warning signs and ignored them. But with you, I wasn't wrong. You're exactly who I hoped you'd be. Your father would be proud." Sloane felt something crack in her chest. "What if I fail?" "Then you fail. But you fail trying to do the right thing, and that's all any of us can do." Ironside looked at the dark water. Dieter Kraus died trying to atone for the lives he'd taken. I've spent 40 years trying to turn his gift into something good. Now it's your turn. Whatever happens in Annapolis, you carry Rivervale forward with honor. That's all I ask. "I promise, sir." "I know you do. That's why I chose you." The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and cold. The kind of November day in Maryland where the sky looks like polished steel and the wind cuts through clothing like it's not even there. The Naval Academy buzzed with activity as thousands converged for graduation, tradition carved in stone and protected by enough security to invade a small country. Except this year, the security was different. Heavier. Federal agents mixed with military police. Snipers on rooftops. Nobody was watching the river. Nobody except Sloane and Ironside. They infiltrated before dawn through a maintenance access point Ironside remembered from 30 years ago. Sloane wore a tactical wetsuit under civilian clothes, her rifle wrapped in waterproof cloth. Ironside moved beside her, limping but steady. "Radio check," Brennan's voice crackled. "Command to Ghost, how copy?" "Ghost copies all," Sloane whispered, proceeding to insertion point. "You're clear for approach. Ceremony starts in 90 minutes. Parks takes the stage at 1400. "Roger that." They reached the waterline as the sun touched the horizon, turning the Severn from black to gray to something almost alive. Sloane stared at the water and felt everything her father had taught her and everything Ironside had refined come into focus. This was it, the test. Ironside put a hand on her shoulder. "I'll cover the elevated positions. Anything above waterline, I'll spot it. But down there, that's your domain. Trust your training. Trust the river. And if I see her, talk first, shoot second, but don't hesitate if she forces your hand." His eyes were serious. "She's dangerous, Sloane. Don't forget that." "I won't, sir." They split without another word. Ironside moved toward the stadium's upper walkways. Sloane walked to the water's edge, and for a moment she just stood there, listening, feeling. Then she stepped into the Severn River and let the cold embrace her like coming home. The water was darker than the Potomac, colder, with a current that pulled harder. Sloane sank beneath the surface and felt the world above disappear, replaced by pressure and silence and focus. She moved through the water like a ghost, barely disturbing the current, her breathing controlled through a reed. Her rifle was ready, but not raised. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness. 20 meters from the stadium, she found the first sign. Anchor cables running along the riverbed, secured to weights that shouldn't be there. She followed them to equipment that looked like a nightmare made of metal. An automated firing system, remote triggered, positioned with perfect geometry to put a round through Admiral Parks. Vera's backup plan. Sloane worked quickly, disabling the trigger mechanism and cutting power feeds. It took 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours, but the equipment went dark and Sloane moved on. She found Vera 40 meters upstream, exactly where Ironside had predicted. The other woman was positioned in perfect River Vale stance, her rifle aimed at the stadium, her breathing so controlled that Sloane almost missed her. Vegetation camouflage, compact frame. Sloane moved closer, every muscle screaming to take the shot now. But Ironside's words echoed, "Talk first." She tapped Vera's shoulder with her knife, the international diver's signal for "surface now." Vera spun, fast and fluid, eyes wide with recognition behind her goggles. Then Vera's knife came up, and they were fighting in zero visibility, two operators trained by the same man trying to kill each other in cold water. Sloane fought defensive, trying to disarm. Vera fought with desperation and rage, every strike meant to end the threat. They grappled and spun, using the current and the rocks. Sloane took a cut across her forearm. Vera took a kick to the solar plexus that knocked her backward and made her breathing tube snap free. They both surfaced, gasping, treading water 80 meters from shore, face to face. Vera ripped off her goggles. Sloane saw a woman in her mid-30s with eyes that burned with righteousness and pain and certainty. "You!" Vera gasped. "Ironside sent you." "He tried to stop you without killing you," Sloane said, breath coming hard. "I'm here to finish that job. You can't stop me. I've planned this for 8 years. Your automated system is disabled. Your position is compromised. It's over, Vera. It's never over." Vera's hand moved beneath the water, and suddenly she had a pistol aimed at Sloane's chest. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." "I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to stop you from killing yourself." Something flickered in Vera's eyes. Confusion. "What? You think this ends with Parks dead and you getting away? You think you fade back into shadows? You're planning to surface after the shot, make them see you, force security to gun you down. Martyrdom. Just like your father." Vera's gun hand trembled. "How?" "Because Ironside knew. He knows you, Vera. He knows what losing your father did to you. He knows you're not a killer at heart. You're a daughter who never got justice." "They murdered him," Vera's voice cracked. "Senator Halstead authorized the operation. General Moreau commanded it. Director Cross covered it up. And Parks provided the intelligence that sent him into a trap. They all knew it was suicide, and they sent him anyway." "I know," Sloane said and meant it. "My father died in Helmand in 2003. I was 7. I spent years wanting someone to pay, wanting revenge." "Then you understand." "I understand that revenge destroys the avenger, not the target." Sloane's voice was firm, but not harsh. "Your father was CIA. He lived for the truth, for intelligence, for getting it right. You're living for your pain, and that dishonors everything he stood for." Vera's face twisted. "Ironside abandoned me, said I wasn't worthy. He was wrong about one thing and right about another. Wrong to think you couldn't learn the technique. You're brilliant at it. But right that you were learning it for the wrong reasons." Sloane shifted in the water, keeping her hands visible. "He's here, Vera, on shore, with a rifle, aimed at you right now. But he won't shoot, because he still believes you can choose a different path." "There is no path. I've killed 3 people. I'm a murderer." "You're a whistleblower who went too far." Sloane let that sink in. "You can pull that trigger, kill Parks. Security kills you. You die a terrorist, and your father's name gets dragged through the mud as the man who raised a daughter who became an assassin." The gun wavered. "Or you surface with me, right now, stand trial, testify about what really happened in Prague, expose the cover-up legally, put their corruption on record. Die eventually, maybe, but die with your father's honor intact. Die a whistleblower who tried to seek justice, not a murderer who became the thing she hated." From the shore, Admiral Parks's voice began speaking through amplified speakers. The ceremony had started. The target was exposed. This was the moment Vera had planned for. Her finger was on the trigger. Sloane extended her hand, palm up, between them. One warrior to another, Vera. Choose honor over vengeance. Choose truth over blood. Choose to be your father's daughter instead of his avenger. Silence stretched. Water lapped. The current pulled. Parks's voice droned on about tradition and service. Vera's eyes filled with tears that mixed with river water. There's no honor left for me. Then let me help you earn it back, the way Ironside's been trying to for 40 years, the way I'm trying to earn my father's memory every day. We're all carrying weight, Vera, but we carry it together or it crushes us alone. For what felt like an eternity, Vera just stared at Sloane's outstretched hand. Then, slowly, she lowered the pistol, let it drop into the river. Gone. She took Sloane's hand. Together they swam toward shore. The moment they hit the shallows, the world exploded with noise. Tactical teams swarmed, voices shouting, rifles tracking. Sloane hauled Vera out, both exhausted and shaking, and immediately 100 red laser dots painted them both. Hands up! Drop any weapons! Down on the ground now! Sloane raised one hand high, the other supporting Vera. She shouted above the chaos. Suspect in custody! Corporal Sloane Merrick, MARSOC. Automated weapon system disabled. Vera Ashford secured and compliant. Confusion rippled through security teams. Radios crackled. Officers exchanged uncertain looks. Then Brennan pushed through the cordon. Hold fire! Stand down! All teams stand down! Rifles lowered incrementally. Behind Brennan, limping but moving fast, came Ironside. He reached the shoreline and locked eyes with Vera. For a moment, teacher and failed student just looked at each other across years of mistakes and pain. I'm sorry, Ironside said quietly. I should have helped you instead of turning you away. I failed you when you needed me most. Vera's composure finally cracked. Tears ran freely. I failed myself, Colonel. You tried to teach me honor. I chose revenge instead. We can fix that, starting now. Admiral Parks appeared at the edge of the crowd, flanked by Secret Service. He was in his 70s, weathered and sharp. He looked at Vera with eyes that held something complicated. Dr. Ashford, he said, I knew your father. He was a good officer, a good man. What happened in Prague was a tragedy, a mistake, one I've regretted for 12 years. Regret doesn't bring him back, Vera said, but the fire was gone. Just ash and exhaustion remained. No, but truth might honor his memory better than this would have. Parks gestured to the scene. You want justice? Then stand trial. Testify. Let the world hear what really happened. I'll support your testimony. I'll tell the truth about Prague, about the mission, about the cover-up, all of it, on the record. Vera stared at him, searching for lies and finding only weary honesty. Why would you do that? Because your father deserved better, and because you still can be better than the worst thing you've done. Parks turned to Brennan. Agent, Dr. Ashford is to be treated as a whistleblower pending investigation. Full protection, full cooperation from Naval Intelligence. Understood? Brennan nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Medical teams moved in, wrapping thermal blankets around both Sloane and Vera, checking vitals, treating the cut on Sloane's arm. Kellerman pushed through, gripping her shoulder. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Thank you. Thorne stood behind him. He stepped forward, came to attention, and saluted. I was wrong about you, Corporal. Completely wrong. I apologize. Sloane returned the salute, too tired to do anything else. Apology accepted, Gunny. The next hours blurred. Statements, debriefs, medical evaluations. Brennan took Vera into federal custody with protections in place. Parks filed disclosure documents about Prague that would take months to process, but would eventually expose the truth. Ironside sat with Sloane in a quiet room, both wrapped in blankets, drinking coffee that actually tasted good. You did it, he said. You stopped her without killing her. That's the rarest kind of victory. I almost didn't. I almost took the shot underwater. But you didn't. That's what matters. That's the difference between being a warrior and being a killer. Ironside reached into his jacket and pulled out something small. Dieter Krause's Stasi ID badge from 1983. Faded, cracked. He gave this to me when I pulled him across the Elbe. Proof he'd left that life behind. Now I'm giving it to you. Ironside placed it in her hand. Rivervale dies with you, Sloane. No more students. No more secrets. Can you carry that burden? She held the badge, feeling 40 years of history. What if someone else needs to learn it, for the right reasons? Then trust your judgment, like I trusted mine with you, like Dieter trusted his with me. Ironside's eyes were serious but calm. You're the guardian now. That's the real Rivervale, not the technique, the responsibility. I'll carry it, sir, with honor. I know you will. That's why I chose you. 3 weeks later, Sloane stood at the edge of the Severn River at sunset, alone except for ghosts. She held a small bundle of white flowers, a tradition Ironside had taught her for honoring the dead. She scattered them on the current and watched them drift downstream, carrying her thoughts to her father and to Dieter Krause and to everyone who'd carried the weight of Rivervale. Behind her, footsteps crunched on gravel. She turned to find Ironside, leaning on a cane now, his limp more pronounced. He'd retired officially this time, for real. They stood together at the water's edge, two soldiers at the end of a war nobody else knew had been fought. Vera's testimony went public yesterday, Ironside said. 3 congressional investigations opened. CIA Inspector General launching review of Prague. Parks recommended for disciplinary action for the cover-up. Your friend Thorne is teaching sensitivity training now. Good, Sloane said. And you? They're offering you instructor positions, advanced schools, places where your skills could train the next generation. I don't know if I want to teach, sir. You don't have to teach Rivervale to teach something valuable. Ironside looked at her. Your father taught you that water never lies. You taught Vera that mercy can be stronger than revenge. Those lessons matter more than any technique. Maybe. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the river orange and gold. Finally, Ironside spoke again, softer. I'm dying, Sloane. Cancer. Pancreatic. They gave me 6 months, maybe 8. Her chest tightened. Sir, it's all right. I've had a good run. Longer than I deserved. Longer than Dieter got. Longer than your father got. He smiled slightly. When I go, I want my ashes scattered here, in the Potomac, where I taught you, where everything came full circle. I'll do it, I promise. I know you will. He gripped her shoulder one last time. You're going to be fine, Corporal. More than fine. You're going to carry this forward in ways I never could. And someday, when you're my age, you'll pass it to someone worthy, just like I passed it to you. Yes, sir. They saluted the river together, 2 warriors honoring something bigger than themselves. Then Ironside limped back to his car, and Sloane stood alone with the water, in the sunset, in the weight of responsibility that felt lighter somehow. She thought about her father's Navy Cross, thought about the promise she'd made at his grave 22 years ago, thought about how she'd spent her whole life trying to live up to a memory and had finally, maybe, started to create her own. Some warriors move through the world without noise, without applause, without recognition. They do the hard things in darkness and carry the weight in silence. They choose mercy when violence is easier. They honor the dead by serving the living. Sloane Merrick was one of them. And in the quiet way that mattered most, she always would be. The river flowed on, carrying secrets it would never tell. And Sloane Merrick walked away from it, knowing that some gifts were also curses, and some curses were also gifts, and the difference between them was always, always in how you chose to carry them. She chose honor, and that, in the end, was enough.